All righty. Welcome, welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining. My name is John Arrojave. I'm joined by Holly Sylvestri today, so we're really excited. We have a great webinar coming up, and I see everyone trickling in. Sara Ibarra just raised her hand already. Welcome, Sara. And we have Min. Welcome from New York City. Enrique, feel free to put in the chat where you're joining us from. So welcome everyone. As everyone trickles in, I just want to run through before we get into the webinar topic, I just want to run through a few updates from CCC. We're actually also going to put the links in the chat. So coming up here in October, we have machine translation with Laurence. She will be, quick summary, introducing the fundamentals of machine translation. So learn to identify what content is or is not appropriate for free machine translation tools. Become aware of the important legal consequences of machine translation that's used in everyday scenarios. So that's in October. We just put the link in there. We'll probably put it in there again. And then we have in November, interpreting for forensic evaluation. So forensic evaluations used in many contexts, including healthcare, legal proceedings, asylum applications, and immigration hearings. So a successful forensic evaluation often requires the interviewee to detail uncomfortable and upsetting information about their lives, learn to navigate those encounters. So that's hugely useful. And Andrew, if you could actually put the trainer for that one. And then we have our TOT. We are teaching that again in November. So this is truly for aspiring trainers. If you want to run your own sessions of the Community Interpreter International and really understand the nuts and bolts of delivering a 40-hour qualifying course for interpreters, this is it. It really takes you through the mechanics of delivering the course. And we find it's increasingly helpful for seasoned, excuse me, my phone's ringing for some reason, seasoned language access leaders and aspiring language access leaders. We're also going to be at OCDE coming up next week. Holly's going to be there as well, presenting ATA towards the end of October. So just to jump into our topic for today, obviously everyone sees the screen. So insights from the Interpreting Safe AI Task Force. So AI, as we all know, has really been at the forefront of the discussion on the interpreting profession. The Safe AI Task Force, we're going to put a link to the LinkedIn group here, has as its mission establish, disseminate, promote industry-wide guidelines and best practices for the responsible adoption of AI. So hugely important. I can't think of a better person, honestly, than Holly Silvestri to walk us through this. She's going to roll her eyes as I say that, but I think it's very true. So Holly is the Senior Director of Translation, Training, and Curriculum at the National Center for Interpretation at the University of Arizona. She's a former lawyer, a former teacher. She's been an educational interpreter for a long time, and she's also the CEO of Linguistic Connections. She's an interpreter of Spanish, English, French, probably a few others that we're not going to get into, right? So really excited to turn it over to Holly. Holly's the expert on Holly, and excited for this webinar. Everyone, if you could put your questions either into the Q&A or to the chat, Holly's going to present for a little bit, and then in about 45 minutes, we'll have some time for Q&A. So thanks so much for joining us, Holly. Looking forward to this.
Excellent. Thank you so much for the nice introduction, John.
Absolutely.
I'm going to get right to this because I think that the Safe AI Task Force is A, much more interesting than me, and B, much more what you came for. So let's get started here. First things first, let's talk a little bit about artificial intelligence. I know it's a little bit late in the game for this if you've been reading the newspaper, but just to situate ourselves, you've got artificial intelligence, right? And then underneath that, you've got machine learning. And then a subset of that would be deep learning. And then a subset of that would be LLMs, large language models, and generative AI. So all of this is considered artificial intelligence. What is most of import to us is the large language models and the generative AI, because that is what people are starting to use to replace our services in some cases. Um, and then, of course, you have to worry about whether it's general artificial intelligence, which hasn't been reached yet, and that's a whole other presentation, or just artificial intelligence. At this point, I can't identify all of this and talk about that because that's another presentation, but I wanted to give you an idea of how this all fits together. Um, and let's move on. So, what happened to create the Safe AI Task Force? We have to go back in time, not very far, although I'm old enough. I was around when Prometheus created fire. I get it. ChatGPT was launched on November 30th, 2022. It seems like it's ages ago, right? We're on like ChatGPT version 6, whatever. But it sort of hit everybody like a big boulder. It crossed 1 million users in just 5 days, and it gained 100 million users by January 2023. And now I haven't even looked to see how many users, but as of October of that year, it saw 1.5 billion visitors per month. You've got the free version and the not and the paid version. I'm just talking about the free version, so the paid version is separate. It's pretty amazing how fast this thing grew. To give you an idea, ChatGPT reached 1 million users in 5 days. It took Netflix, the Netflix app on your phone, I know it comes on your computer as well, over a year to get 1 million users, right? So people were hungry for this and they wanted to play with it immediately. There are, however, a lot of concerns about tools like ChatGPT that use AI. Among them are privacy, the security of your data when you're using it, right? Are you inputting things that could be used for other purposes that you are not giving consent to? Accuracy and reliability. I'm sure everyone has seen all the hallucinations and faulty logic, articles in the newspaper. The source data limitations, right? How are they training the large language model and the bias that that leads to? The lack of contextual information that the machine, doing the translation or the interpretation has problems with, mostly the cultural cues, right, which a human would automatically pick up on. And then the accountability issues, right, which the lawyers are up in a kerfuffle about, which is why they want to keep the human in the loop, right, to be able to blame them. And then, of course, the potential for misuse. You've seen, I'm sure, the articles in the paper about, oh, people can use, ChatGPT to do this, that, or the other thing that's a nefarious use. And it is being used now for a lot of nefarious um, activities, unfortunately. It's the nature of the beast. So there are a lot of issues along with the good sides of AI. You've seen a reaction uh, on October 30th in 2023, which is pretty fast considering. There was the executive order on the safe, secure, and trustworthy development and the use of artificial intelligence. There have been, and I think right now, rather than a period of um, new iterations of ChatGPT, I think we're now in a time period where the law is trying to catch up in a lot of places. This was the beginning of it in the United States. The Europeans are also doing their effort, and Asia is as well. And the UN is heading a task force as well. So it's a worldwide effort, I think, because everyone sees both the very positive sides of AI, but also the very negative repercussions if it's misused or if it's used for other purposes, or if we let some of those cons, take over, there could be serious repercussions. So everyone is now, I think, in that phase of, oh, now we need the lawmakers to catch the law up, right, to the technological advances. So you heard John talk about our vision. Why did we even create it? Because we saw this onslaught coming, and we forgive me, you know, sue me later, but I'm also a translator, and I saw a big parallel, as did almost all of us on the workforce, on the task force, between what happened to translators with the introduction of machine translation, and this is my take on it, forgive me, but when translators sort of saw machine translation come into the marketplace, they kind of ignored it, hoping it would go away, and it didn't. And unfortunately, they didn't take a seat at the table and say, "Hey, you need to listen to us because it's not doing what it's supposed to do, or it's there are some dangers here." And so they never got their seat at the table because they were sort of in their little corner hoping it would go away. We hope to do the opposite. We wanted to have a seat at the table and talk to the developers and say, "Hey, wait a minute, you need to talk to a linguist because if you're going to develop this, we agree that it could be good for language access, but you need to have certain conditions." Now, have we been 100% successful? No, but at least we're having the conversation. So our mission became to establish, disseminate, and promote industry-wide guidelines and best practices because we wanted there to be a responsible adoption of AI in interpreting, right? And we do want to talk about, and honestly, when we developed this, we didn't think it through because, and this is my take again, people have co-opted this idea of responsible adoption. You see it all the time. Um, the problem is we should have said accountable. Accountability is what we want. We want the services that use AI interpreting to be accountable for the errors, right? Here's the difference between responsibility and accountability. You can take responsibility for something and say you're sorry. Doesn't mean you take accountability. Accountability means you have to do something about it. There needs to be a change. And that's what we're working towards now. So our mission may change as a result, but the concept is the same. We want people to be responsible about this, but we also want them to be accountable. All right, so let's talk a little bit about the milestones that the organization went through, right? Just so you know, we launched at the end of June of 23 because we saw, right, this coming, and we said, okay. And by we, I mean I am part of the administrative committee, but there's a huge group of people involved in this. And just so you know, it's not just translators and interpreters. The administrative group and the stakeholders um, committee, which is much larger, is made up of all of the elements of the interpreting and translation world. So we've got tech vendors, tech creators, uh, interpreters and translators, coders, uh, end users, and just so you know, I am very proud of this fact. We are one of the only, hopefully soon to be organizations, but we're still a task force, groups, let's put it that way, that have decided to work in tandem with both the spoken language interpreting world and the ASL world within the United States, which is American Sign Language, which is the signed language world, which unfortunately hasn't been the case in a lot of the organizations in the United States. We have in many ways the same goals, and yet we've worked in two separate silos. So we decided we were going to work together and have a unified message to make it stronger. So I'm very proud of that fact. So as a result, um, I will be talking about the spoken language issues, but we also have done research about ASL and AI. So I will talk a little bit about that, but I don't want to represent that world because I'm not an ASL interpreter 100%. So the workforce group launched in June. We formed the stakeholder assembly, and we have over 600 people in that. So it is a large, large group. Um, we launched a perception survey. That was our first issue because in order to perform any kind of analysis of best practices, you have to have data. And nobody knew anything about how this was functioning in the interpreting and translating world. There were lots of, sort of hearsay articles, people's individual experiences, but we needed a bank of data to actually be able to say, okay, this is what's happening out there, and this is what we say should be done as a result. So we took the money, you're welcome, out of our own pockets and paid CSA, which is one of the primary research institutions in the United States for research in this domain. And we launched the perception survey. Um, and by March of 2024, we published those survey results. And that was our first big uh, attempt at doing something that would affect how this data would be perceived and used. Um, the the survey took so long because we wanted it to be as complete as possible. Plus, we were also doing it for the signed languages world and the spoken languages world. So it looks like, oh wow, it took you almost 6 or 7 months to get this data out. That's actually really, really fast, considering the amount of work that it required. Um, Plus, it was at the time when things were coming at you super fast, and we knew that we needed to make a statement. So that was our first goal, and we did it. And I will talk a little bit about those results. I'll come back to to this, or I'll refer back to this slide later. But I want to finish what's on the slide. Then we took that data, which I'll talk about in a minute, and we published guidance and ethical principles. Now, we don't call them guidelines, we call them guidance. Why? Because it's very general. We all know that there are specific domains in interpreting and in translation, and they each have their own both legal framework that they need to work in, but also their own specific issues, right? With their end users, with the domain that they're working in, whether it's community interpreters in schools or community interpreters in healthcare. Um, so we didn't feel that we were equipped to do anything other than give general guidance. And then we thought we're going to hand this over to the professional associations to allow them to then modify their own guidance, um, and give guidelines specific to each individual area. And I think that's where we are now because there has been NCICH guide guidelines for healthcare. And I know as a fact that NAGIT is working on changing their ethical principles to incorporate our work. And NAGIT is the National Association of Judiciary Interpreters and Translators, for those of you who don't know. So we've got legal covered. And AAITE, the American Association of Interpreters and Translators in Education, is also working on publishing their own version of guidelines for that domain. So I feel very proud of the fact that work is expounding into the professional associations, which was one of our hopes. And then most recently, we again, you're welcome, took money out of our pockets and said, okay, we need now to do another bunch of research. This time, instead of focusing on the interpreter world and the end users, we need to talk to the professionals who are creating this tech and the professionals who are selling this tech and interpreters who are working in that world to see how speech to speech interpreting is advancing. Because what is happening as well is while we're doing all of these surveys, things are changing so rapidly that sometimes you just can't keep up. When we launched the first perception survey, a good deal, right, in 2023, a good deal of what they called, AI interpreting was actually AI translation and then speech synthesis, which has its own issues. Now we're talking about actual speech to speech, right? Much like a human, someone speaks and then the AI speaks. Um, and they have made significant advances in speech synthesis, right? The creation of speech, and in the ability of the AI to understand the transcription. So we're talking about the possibility of actual speech to speech coming up soon. So we did this survey to make sure that we have enough data to be able to then put out some professional guidelines for, okay, we understand now that this is the spectrum and AI is included in the possibility of services for interpreting. But when do you use it, right? So that came out most recently this month, right? And CSA did a webinar on that. So now that I've given you sort of a lot of the information, I'm going to stop um, sharing here so that I can share again and talk a little bit about the survey results, the first survey, and also show you a little bit where you can find the rest of the information. Because given the hour, I can't go through all the information that we got, but I'm going to hit the first survey results because I have like the 10 big points that came out of that. And then I will show you, how to get into the Safe AI website so that you can see where you can get all the information, because this has been done so that anyone can access it. There's no paywall. The whole purpose of this is to disseminate this information. We want interpreters to know this. We want them to use it appropriately to be able to talk to their direct clients or to talk to the people that they work for, the agencies, whatever you call them, the LSPs, and tell them, look, here's information that you need to know. Okay, so none of this is behind a paywall. Nobody's expecting you to come up with cash to have this information. The whole idea is we wanted there to be some place that people could come and get verifiable information about the industry and how it's being affected by AI, without having to worry about, opening their wallets. The whole idea is we need to be able to share this information freely. Okay, so forgive me a moment. I'm stopping sharing and I have to share another document. So, oh yes. Okay, there we go. And share the screen now. There. Okay. I'm assuming that now you can see the document that says key findings. Okay. Again, this is the first survey we did, which again is in 2023, but I think it's important to start with that one so you can see how the information has evolved. Okay. So CSA Research again did this at our behest, and we had 9,400 data points, 118 items on our survey, and we try to get like a comprehensive overview of people's experiences with what we call automated solutions, for lack of a better general term. And we had 2,543 people across 82 countries, although we are based in the United States. Because of the laws with AI, our guidelines have to be relevant only for the United States, but we had people from 82 countries, again, showing you that people were desperate to do something as a result of the, you know, the onslaught of all the news coming out saying, oh, this is going to replace all these jobs. People responded, and we wanted to understand, the quality of their experience with AI, the pros and cons, their criteria for whether they, used any criteria for automated interpreting, and the suitability and like different use cases. So here are the key findings of that. There are many, many more, but these are like the top. All right. And remember, this is early days. Okay. So not a lot of people had experience, but we wanted to see what was there. At this point, we were talking about automated captioning because basically it was, they were capturing the speech and they were putting it in written form, right? And that was how they were doing the translation or the interpreting. 27% of the 2,500 or so people responded saying they had used or tested automated captioning either moderately or all the way to extensively. So it was a smaller sample, right? Remember, it was the beginning. People were hesitant. Not a lot of people had adopted it yet. Of those 27%, 53% reported their experiences, and they talked about obviously the high integration of AI in interpreting services. They talked about the fact that yes, the LSPs that they were working for were either considering using it or experimenting with it, etc. But not a lot of the interpreters, as a subset of that group, had actual experience with using it. Okay. I think that number has probably changed significantly in the interim, right? But that was the first capturing of data that we were able to get. Obviously, there was a mixture of acceptance and skepticism about AI in interpretation. There is a general consensus on the potential of AI to contribute positively to language access in general, and that is Safe AI's position. We do believe AI can be part of the solution for language access. We're not anti AI. Um, but it has to be done under certain conditions. And to define those conditions and ensure that AI is properly deployed means for us that you need to respect the stakeholders' rights, needs, and preferences. And we saw in the survey that that remained a challenge. And there were different sectors, of course, because the survey, it was one of those surveys where you could branch off depending upon what kind of respondent you were, right? There was a tunnel that for the interpreters who were, involved in AI. There was a tunnel for the tech vendors. There was a tunnel for LSPs. So we got different types of responses. So I think that allows for the difference between acceptance and skepticism. Not to put too fine a point on it, I think at that point there was a lot of skepticism on the part of interpreters, which still exists today, right? Because we feel threatened. Oh my God, a computer's going to take my job. And there was a lot more acceptance on the sales side, right? Because, ooh, look, it's a new tool I can use and it's going to be cheaper and I can make more money. It yes and no, but so that was the mixture that we saw. No surprise. There were financial implications and cost considerations. There were questions about that on the survey. Um, the financial aspect of AI adoption was clearly identified, right? Most people saw that the automation of this service would be a cost reduction strategy, despite potential sacrifices in quality. They also noted there was variability in the acceptance based on who bears the cost. We asked the question like, is AI better than nothing for language access? And and it did matter who paid, right? If the end user was required to pay, they said, well, I'd rather have AI than pay, that kind of a thing. So there were issues with the cost, which is true in our industry, right? Who bears the cost of the language access is always the big, elephant in the room. Um, so that is it reflected that complex interplay between the financial considerations, the quality of service, and the ethical standards that we're supposed to maintain. No surprises there either, really. When it comes to transparency and informed consent, however, we did have a really interesting result. Okay. An overwhelming majority of the respondents said they wanted clear disclosure when AI is used in interpreting, and especially the end users, of course. They said we need transparency and informed consent. Like you need to accept using automated interpreting if given a choice, and you need to be given that choice, right? Um, of course, we saw that that isn't necessarily the case a lot of the time. Um, and that's always been true, right? There isn't a lot of transparency. It's when language access is supplied in our industry, it's often, here you go. It's set, take it or leave it. And we wanted to try and change that mold. We're working still to try and change that mold so that people can say, yeah, no, I don't want AI interpreting. I want a human being. So that's where we're working with a lot of the regulatory agencies to sort of change the perspective on that. Um, but it underscores the importance of everybody being aware of and consenting to the use of these automated solutions. We talked a little about the ethical considerations, right? They were central to a lot of people's responses to this. A majority of people agreed that replacing people with machines, remember when all this first came out, there was all this hype in the press. Oh my God, AI is going to take over 20% of jobs, and what are these people going to do? And blah, blah, blah. And that sentiment was particularly strong among both interpreters and the service recipients, the customer, the end customer, with a marked shift towards AI apprehension, like, oh my God, and that's what we felt, right, amongst the interpreters, like, holy crud, this is going to be a problem for us. And the ethical nature of that, right? What a robot taking over a human job? I'm not so sure I like that, right? Is this the world we want to live in? And then, of course, we had in our data a significant divide in opinions when no human interpreter is available and the subsequent use of AI. There was a nearly equal split between those who prefer AI to nothing at all, and that was across the board. That included interpreters, end users, etc., and those who would rather have no language access than rely on AI, which I think is kind of interesting, right? It's like, no, there was a lot of people who were just definitively no, right? I don't want anything to do with this. And there were people who were like, well, as a last resort, yeah, you can use AI. So, and I think that was fairly indicative of the mood of the country at that point, right? There were a lot of people who were doing that in a lot of professions who were just like, maybe sometimes if I'm not available. Now, what you need to know about that particular aspect of it is I think there's a difference in how people view this. Um, LSPs, language service providers, at the beginning, for a lot of reasons, not just for cost cutting, but for the ability to be able to provide the service that they say they provide in languages of lesser diffusion, right? Less of an issue when you have a big pool of interpreters. Let's be honest, Spanish is the gorilla in the room in the United States, right? There's tons of Spanish interpreters. But if you're talking about Mixteco, Zapotec, um, a trilingual ASL and Spanish interpreter, there are very few of those. And a lot of people, when you advertise your services, you've seen them for the agencies. The website lists, 80,000 languages, Burmese, excellent. But then when you get the request for Burmese, you have to actually find a human being that can do it. And so a lot of LSPs were like, oh my God, this is great. We don't need to find the interpreter anymore. We can use the LLMs to do this job for those languages of lesser diffusion instead of having to run around and find these, interpreters in languages that we really don't have. Well, no. It's, of course, since come out. The information dribbled out slowly to, I think, the general public that, yeah, this AI solution only works if you've got the training data. And what are they using to train on? Well, pretty much anything they can get their hands on in the internet. Well, I don't know about you, but I have yet to see a Zapotec website. So the idea that they could use this to substitute for the languages of lesser diffusion blew up pretty quickly. They are still working on it. On the AI side, they're working on creating data to feed the machines to be able to use it. But honestly, right now, the LLM solution is pretty much like the top 8 languages, and they're pretty European. Spanish, Italian, German, etc. And again, of course, it works really well with English because, hello, the internet is like 57% English. Um, So those top languages are what it's most capable of being used for, and not the LLM. So that idea has kind of shifted since this, but that was the first issuance of this data, and LLMs were like, woo, or LSPs were like, woohoo, we can use this instead of having to run around, and no, not so much. Okay. So there was that. So that, there's a whole bunch of other really interesting data. Even though it's old data, it's still really relevant. So um, I strongly suggest that you listen to the little webinar that we have on our site that gives you that. You can download the short report or the long report, 350 pages for you to peruse at your leisure. And let me show you where you can go get that now. Forgive me, I know this is annoying to have to stop share, but um, it's kind of the nature of the beast. All right. Okay. Okay. So I'm taking you here because this is the web page, and this is where you can get all this stuff. Okay. So if you'd like information, you can sign up for updates here, right? And we'll send you information about our meetings, about stuff we're doing. Okay, I'm going to scroll down to the bottom because it's from the bottom up. The first thing I want to say is I haven't talked at all about what used to be called the Deaf Advisory Group on AI and Sign Language, which was part of our task force. They were working in the deaf and hard of hearing world with the ASL interpreters on this issue. If that's your issue, this is the information. Um, Generally speaking, although again, everything changes because there's constantly new inventions in the tech world. Right now, it's a bit less of a threat because ASL is a visual language, and like it or not, they're behind in that tech. So it's not so much a threat to ASL interpreters as it is to spoken interpreters. Let's put it that way. However, there are still a lot of issues with it. Um, and it's interesting because the deaf and hard of hearing world, again, this is my opinion, but I kind of know what I'm talking about. Take it with a grain of salt. The deaf and hard of hearing world is a little split from ASL interpreters, right? Because they kind of have a different perspective. The deaf and hard of hearing world is anxious for this tech to come out because it will open up new possibilities of communication without necessarily having a human attached to them all the time to communicate with the hearing world, which I recognize, right? They have a right to be autonomous, and somehow they view this as a possibility where they don't necessarily need to be tethered to an interpreter to communicate with the hearing world. Um, so their goals are slightly shifted as opposed to the ASL and the deaf interpreters in the group, who are, again, just as the spoken interpreters, feel a little threatened by this technology maybe taking their job. So it's an interesting perspective if that's your thing. That's where you go here. There's a video transcript if you just want to, read it. The video is about 2 hours long, and it is signed as well. I don't think it's spoken. Um, this is the perceptions. If you want the full survey report, you can download it here. It may take a while because it's 350 pages. The summary report is only 70, but there's a huge amount of data in there, and I strongly suggest you go through it. And this is talking about the overview of the findings. She will say, much like I will, but with charts and further explanation, a lot of what I just said, the top findings, but it's interesting to hear it from the researcher's perspective alone. That's also signed, so if you are in the deaf and hard of hearing world, you can have access to that. And then here is the latest research that came out in September at the top, right? Because it's building up. This is the full report. It's a little bit shorter. It's not the 350 pages, but you can notice, right, that there's now a range of interpreting options between, going from 100% fully human to 100% AI. It's inserted itself into the industry. Like it or not, it's not going away like we thought, but we are trying to put barriers around where it can be used so that it's used responsibly and so that it opens language access and doesn't cut off jobs, but makes more work for those of us who are the human end of this industry. So that is super, super important. And I think it's very um, relevant for those of you who maybe have direct clients and are asking you to be the expert. Aren't we always? Remember COVID when we were supposed to be instantly the experts in remote interpretation and you had to learn all that? Well, now you have to learn about AI. Sorry. Um, but this will give you a lot of interesting points to go through because the data, I don't want to open it because I'll get into the weeds, but there's questions that you can ask your client and like guide them through like, okay, let me ask you a few questions to see whether this is an appropriate situation to use AI. It literally helps you. So I think this is an essential document, not just for LSPs to have, but individuals who may have direct clients that are dealing with this choice now. Like, what do I do? Where on the spectrum does this event fall? And what, solutions can I come up with? Something hybrid, 100% human, 100% AI. This is where you can be of service on that end. Um, and this, of course, is the first level of guidance. This is the guidance that we put out. That's the generalized guidance. Okay. This, if you click on it, hopefully this will follow me, maybe. You can download it here. But I just wanted to go through the general ethical principles that we talk about in this guidance that hopefully get disseminated into the individual silos, right? Medical interpreting, legal interpreting, um, educational interpreting, through the ethical documents that are coming out by those professional organizations. Because, there's an overall umbrella of, yeah, it should be handled this way generally. But like I said, each individual domain has its own specific legal framework and situational framework that needs to be worked out in those professional organizations. But we came up with like I think overarching principles that are very important to keep in mind. If nothing else, keep these in mind when you're talking to people about AI and interpreting. End user autonomy. The end user needs to be able to make the decision about what type of interpreting they want, right? Um, and the transparency of the AI quality for the general public. AI needs to be transparent, right? To everyone in the mix, not only the LSP. Um, the evidence that that it provides for improving the safety and well-being of end users is also one of our principles. Like we want AI for good. It's basically what we're talking about, right? Because like I said, AI can be used for nefarious purposes. And believe me, I'm sure that, DARPA and the government's working on that end, and I don't need to talk about that. But we want AI for good within the spectrum of the interpreting world. Um, so I think those principles are super important. And you can read like scope and why we do this. I think it's very important to read that before you read the details of the ethics, but you can read it at whatever level you want. We also have a glossary of the key terms, which I think are important. As an industry, no, as a profession, response needs to be unified, right? Much like we're not a unionized group, but much like a union has force because everybody answers in the same way and uses the same terminology to talk about the problems in the industry. I think these key terms are something that you might want to look at so that you are starting to talk like we all want everyone to talk about AI in the industry. Um, for instance, instead of the responsible, right, talk about accountable AI. That was just something, referring back to something I said at the beginning. Um, and then if people ask you, well, what's the difference between responsible and accountable? You can educate your client as to what that means. So I think those key terms are also something that you might want to take a look at. Um, and of course, this was then taken And then NCIHC, right? The national, I never remember what NCIHC stands for, but they took it and they did guidelines as opposed to guidance, very different, for using it in the medical field, right? That's the first one that came out, and that's on NCIHC's website. You can Google it by finding it there. So if you're in the medical field, that's one thing I would go and look at right away too. Okay, that is pretty much an overall view of uh, what I had hoped to accomplish. I'm going to open it up for questions. I hope I haven't overspent my time. I tried very hard to keep into my time. Um,
Not at all. Thank you so much, Holly. That was wonderful. I
Good.
actually, just as a follow-up to one of Holly's points, put the
Oh, there
link
we go.
to the National Council on
Perfect.
Interpreting in Healthcare's
Thank you, John. I
AI
don't.
guidance. So Holly, that was a lot. That was fantastic. I'm a community interpreter.
Hmm.
I just heard the term AI for the first time.
Wow.
The takeaway is go to the Safe AI website and what's the primer? What's the 90-second summary on what I should
Okay.
do?
Like I said, unfortunately, interpreters always have to be sort of, they have to have dual role because oftentimes, like with remote interpreting, you need to know about the tech.
Yep,
Anything that affects the industry, you need to know about it. And with AI, the same is true. So you need to understand the terms. People are going to come to you and
understand the
expect
term.
you to be the expert, right? And understand the implications. They're going to come to you and say, I need a solution. You know, if it's your direct client, I need a solution to help me find one. If you're an LSP that's trying to deal with this and create a policy for your organization, same issue. You need to be able to say to your clients, look, here are your spectrum of possibilities. Let's talk about which one is right. So you really do need to understand the foundation of that spectrum. Like, is it 100% human or is it 100% AI? And where does this event fall? In order to do that, you need to understand the implications of each of those things. So that's hopefully why I say go and get educated right now, because this isn't going away. I wish I could tell you it were. I understand your anxiety. Everybody's freaked out a little less now because we've calmed down in the
Mhm.
press, right? If you're familiar with the Gardner Group, they're the ones who did the scale of,
The
AI hype, right?
Yep,
We were in the
the
AI
hype
hype when it
cycle.
first came out, right?
Yep,
AI hype cycle, and now we were in the, and then all the negative stuff came out about it, like,
and
oh,
then
hallucinations and it's horrible and we're never going to use it again. And now we're kind of in a holding pattern at the
yep,
end, the hype cycle, and it'll come back again, right? When we have a new iteration or new tool that does something that,
progress.
again,
Yeah,
right? It'll go through that. You got to learn to live through that and adapt. What else is new, right? Interpreters adapting. Surprise, freaking surprise. No big deal there.
it,
But,
yeah. No,
you
along
know,
those lines, interpreters every day they're
hmm,
with clients, so it's that opportunity, maybe in a pre-session or in a debrief,
yes,
to bring it up. The
yes,
informal education, point them to Safe AI. You can give them the link,
absolutely.
and obviously we need to educate ourselves so that we can give them the skinny
Uh-huh.
on, hey, there's a lot here. I wonder if you could talk briefly about, I don't know if you know of any active lawsuits, because
Oh, yes. Okay.
frequently
So
that's what gets
if
people
you
to.
go to our LinkedIn page and you look at all of our posts, there's one of the posts, and I'll have to find it. I may be able to send it to you, John, so you could send it to people directly. There are um, right now, there's a website that's talking about generalized laws on AI, right?
Okay.
How does this affect us directly? Just to give you an idea, Tennessee, just to pull one out of my hat, has a law that protects your voice. Why are we protecting our voice? Well, because right now they're scraping the web for all of those web things that you created, right? Hello, if you created a Spanish version of the board meeting and it's on a website somewhere in a school, guess what? It's being scraped to use for AI data. And at some point, they may use your voice
Mm,
for their avatar. Tennessee is the only state where that's not possible right now. So you can see, and your voice is essential to you, right? It's an essential part of your being. Who was it? Scarlett Johansson, right? Had
yep,
that
yep,
thing in the press. Like, wait a minute, that
yep.
movie, Her, that sounds like me. No, you can't have my voice. It's the same issue here. They're going to scrape your voice and make it sound like you that's interpreting for their company, even though they're not paying you.
Mm.
Interesting. So a lot of this has legal implications for what do we own as
What
interpreters?
is
Yeah,
ours as a
that's as
person?
human beings overall, but specifically for our field as interpreters, is it our vocabulary? Is it our specific dialect? Is it our voice? All of that I think is mine. Thank you very much. You can't have it. But legally, there ain't so much protection out there right now.
Mm.
So you do need to also be educated. And please, people, I don't care how you vote, but vote on this issue because it affects your profession,
Yeah.
right? It really does affect your profession. Ask your, um, your senator, how do you feel about this issue?
What
Much
are
like when
s-
we had the AB5 issue, are we independent contractors or not? We need to put some pressure on and say, hey, I want to keep my stuff. It's like, you can't have my arm. Thank you.
what are some advocacy things we could do as
I
community
mean,
interpreters?
well, like I say, educate people,
Yep.
educate the end client as
Yep.
well, because they also need to put pressure on the industry to say, where is my consent? Wait a minute, you're
I never
giving me AI
consented to this.
interpreting. I didn't consent to that. Where is my option of human or something in the middle or consent for AI only? Because, if they can't sell it, the
Yeah.
industry can't sell it because the end user is saying, mm-mm, I want options, then we'll be much more likely to be around for a little longer, as they
Mm.
say.
And so
Um,
along those lines, the market penetration. Um,
mm,
how does the market penetration of AI kind of match up to the initial hype that we saw?
okay, so currently, because somebody viewing this in 3 months is going to go, oh, that answer sucks. Yeah, I know,
Mm.
right? Currently,
Today, right?
yeah, today, September 25th of 24, this is not so much of a threat because of the dialogic nature of what we do. AI still has serious issues with being able to have a dialogue. For simultaneous, mm,
It's a little bit better.
that's a lot more of a threat. Sorry, but it is really, really getting really good at doing simultaneous.
Mm.
So a lot of IEC interpreters, right? The conference interpreters are really having a moment of like, what am I going to do now? How am I going to prove my worth? Um, but it's coming. I wish I could say it weren't, right? They're working very hard. And look, it's the nature of the beast. Technological,
It's
you
progressive.
know, progression isn't going to be stopped by anybody. Just ask the auto workers from the 1970s that
Yep.
you're not going to stop that, right?
Yep.
That you got robot arms now in all the factories. Uh, is it a threat to spoken? Much more so than the signed languages. Uh, Again, if you're one of those major languages that it's being used for, it's going to be more of a threat to you, right? The European languages, Spanish being one of them. So you need to prove your value in other ways. You need to understand how to express the fact that you understand cultural nuance, that you understand the risks involved, and you don't have to, refer back to an algorithm to decide whether you should tell someone else things. Um, there are also, I think, going to be opportunities for you to work well with AI. What we haven't talked about here,
Mm.
and Nora Diaz is fantastic. I'm going to give her a plug here about is AI can also really help us. Um, so if you see anything that she does, fabulous, good job, Nora. There are other people too, but Nora does a really great job of giving you the tools. If you're doing simultaneous and you need to create a glossary on the fly, AI can be really helpful. Again, keeping in mind how much you give the information to and at what point you're willing to give that information over, right? Is your client an NDA client? Mm,
Mm.
you may need to use the professional version, which says it's, more secure. Is that going to be available to a lot of community interpreters? Look, I'm one of you guys. I own my own business, but still, 10,000 a month was not something I was willing to shell out to get Deep L, the
Yep.
LLM.
Yep.
No, thank you. Will it come down in price? Maybe. Are there other tools that we can use? Yes, but there are a lot of tools that can help us. I like the idea of, and there's a lot of research being done about consecutive assisted interpreting,
Hmm.
CAI,
Yeah.
because, note taking takes you away from listening, which is one of the primary skills you should have, right? In order to understand and be able to express it, you need to listen carefully to what's being said so that you're accurate. Well, we all know, right? The numbers issue, the names, the addresses, all that stuff. While you're writing down that, you lose track of what's being said.
Yep.
Huh. If the transcripts are up there or the AI can be trained and they're working on that so that it's putting it on the screen, so you've got the address right there. Oh, that makes my job so much easier. I can concentrate on what I do best. That's something I'd like to see integrated into the world more, right? If we, and we're talking to the tech people, talk to people in the tech industry if you know them, talk to interpreters to get them to write or tell their LSP, like, hey, if this comes up, I want to test it. We need to be involved in those tests because we then need to shape it so that it works for us. Not that they come up with this package and say, here you go, and there hasn't been a linguist involved in creating it. Oh,
Mm,
no,
yeah.
absolutely not, right?
Very true.
I'm
Very true.
saying right here, if there are any tech vendors out there that want me to test it, I'm happy to test it for you because I think it should be modeled on what we can use it best for, right? The human centered, not this
Human
human in the
centered.
loop baloney. Human centered interpreting is what I'd say. I want
Can
these
you
tools around me available.
can you elaborate a little bit more because I keep on hearing that term,
Yes,
human in the loop. It's a very tech term, but then
yes,
human centered is
exactly.
clearly very different.
It is. Human in the loop is the tech term, right? They want to reassure us, you know, sue me later. They want to reassure us that, oh no,
And
your
what is
job
it?
isn't going away.
What
It
would
just
it
means,
be in like an interpreting situation?
okay, so human in the loop could be, because it's a broad spectrum of possibilities, could be you are behind the AI interpreting, only interfering when you see the AI interpreting is wrong. You're
Make
the
a
tech
mistake.
interpreter. That personally does not appeal. I think many people get into this industry because they want to be the center of the interpreting. They don't want to be the checking checking a robot. Not for me. Some people
Think
may think it's great, but that is one of the things that and the reverse is also possible, which also frightens me a little. Like that the AI could be checking me and correcting me without me being able to say, no, no, wait, right? It just would override if it sees an error. Well, okay, but the algorithm isn't a
mm,
human being, and
yeah, it doesn't understand.
there are a lot of issues in that use, right?
Yep.
Whereas human centered, please, human centered means I have these tools at my availability, right?
Yep.
And AI and all of its possibilities are one of them. So I can use AI to create my glossary beforehand. I can use AI to get an explanation of a medical term
Mhm.
and then ask the doctor and say, is this what you mean?
Yep.
And then communicate it, clarifying, right, with the doctor's help. All of that, hallelujah, bring it on. But then I want to have multiple screens in
Yeah.
my call
Yeah.
center and I want this available. Does it cost money? Heck yeah. Is it going to come in any time soon? I hope. But we're pushing for that. So that's another term in that glossary, human centered, human in the loop. No, thank you.
That's not empowering the human. That's
No,
not leading
it's
to the
not.
best
It's the tech
outcome for
bros
the
that
patient
use
and the
that term
client.
to comfort us. I don't want it. I want us to use the term that we want, human centered interpreting with AI as a tool.
Absolutely.
Um, so
Oh, and
that's where I
just
stand.
just a quick housekeeping message for everyone or update
Hmm.
for everyone. So we're at the hour mark. So
Oh,
everyone
sorry.
that is here for their CEUs, you will get your CEUs. If you give us 24 hours, we'll get it out to you. You don't have to hang out. You're more than welcome to hang out. I don't know if Holly has a few more
Oh, sure.
minutes
I can have a few minutes. I can answer some
to
questions.
just
That's fine.
address a few more questions. But thank you, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. Always love to see everyone that's commenting and chatting and posing your questions. We're going to try and get to a few more questions with Holly before we have
Sure.
to hop off. So let's see from Rebecca. This was a comment. I hate to say it, but despite the difference in quality, most higher ups and admins don't seem to care in my experience working in hospitals. I wish there was some way to show them the importance, but so many of them are removed from patient care and quality assurance, and they just want to save some money.
Right.
Uh,
Okay. So, with respect to legal, I can give you some comfort. Um, uh, mm, Mr. Muley, who is
mhm.
the
Michael
attorney in
Muley.
charge, right?
Yep.
Michael Muley, lovely friend, got him on speed dial to tell him about all the things that are horrific in the industry every day. Loves me so much.
He's awesome.
Um, but he has said in several instances where I've been present, look, 100% AI ain't going to fly in medical interpreting. It's just too risky right now. Will that change over time? Quite possibly. But right now, you are protected by that. They are sending out letters. I know they're sending out letters to schools saying, yeah, no, you can't do that. Yeah, no, you can't do this. Um, is it the last resort? Absolutely. That legal barrier is always, what we don't want to call on. We want to call on people's actual humane spirit, but in
Yep.
in business, the dollar reigns supreme. I wish it weren't the case, but so that there is that. Um, as far as being able to prove it to them, I
Mhm.
don't know, if that's something that is a possibility. I would say that you maybe want to talk to your supervisor about getting the document that we just put out, right, with all the questions so
Yep.
that they can see, like, it's not so easy. Like, there are issues that you need to address, and one of them is liability,
Yep.
and that may be something that that catches their eye, because think about it this way. Right now, in most of the contracts that people have signed with these tech industry sellers of AI interpreting, they don't accept zero responsibility for errors.
Mm.
Okay, so who do you
So
sue if it
who's
goes
responsible?
wrong? Right.
Yeah.
And in the fine print is the person who signed this document. So the hospital's taking on a lot of risk if they're
Yeah.
just saying, okay, tech bros, use an algorithm. Whatever happens to the patients, no problem. Eh, I think if you point that out to them, they may have
That's
a tightening of their rear end very quickly and
yeah.
make some different
Yeah.
decisions.
Yeah.
Just saying. From
So
a
that's a
legal
really
perspective, that made me freak out. So,
is that pretty universal across all the
from
LLMs?
what I can tell, like, obviously nobody's, exposing their documents
Everything.
to me, but, and it is hearsay, but I do have people that I talk to in the industry, and I've gotten a look at a couple of contracts, and I'm just like, hell no, I'm not signing that. I'm like, no way. So that's something to bring up with your
Okay.
supervisor. Like, can I get a look at that contract? Or it can look at the contract and say, yeah, here's the red line.
Yep.
Did you look at this? Like,
Mm.
no, you don't want that. Hopefully the lawyers have looked at it, but who knows? That's what lawyers are supposed to be for.
Yes. 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 At the beginning of the webinar, you
Mm.
mentioned general AI and that and AI, and right now we're just at
Oh,
AI.
yes.
Can you just elaborate?
GAI. Hmm.
Where are we in terms of AI versus
Okay,
GAI?
this is,
What's the difference? Who cares?
oh, you should. Okay, so GAI, general AI, is often referred to as in the press, and you may have seen the singularity,
Yep.
right? It's general AI is, for lack of a better reference, anybody who's seen the movie with what is it with Arnold Schwarzenegger? I'll be back. What is it?
Terminator 2?
Terminator. That's general AI. Not, well, of course, the negative end of it, right? AI
Yep.
turned against humanity, but
Yep.
AI that is sentient, that
That could
understands
encounter a situation and navigate
and
it.
and
Any
navigate it
situation
much like a human being. That's what we're
versus a
talking about.
very parameter driven algorithm.
Yeah, but it's also really, really hard to do. Okay. Why I'm not upset about GAI right now, even though they keep saying the singularity is like 5 years away. Okay.
No, it's not.
Look, my dad is a lawyer, but his other love was because he went to medical school too, was neurosurgery. So he knew a lot about the brain. God rest his soul, he was very good at that. And one of the last things he said to me, because he was around at the end for the beginning of this general AI stuff. He was like, "Yeah, don't worry. The general AI is they're basing the research on the brain." Okay, sounds not, neural machine translation.
Mhm.
It's all these references because that's what we have, right? We want it to function like us, hence our brain. Anyone who knows anything about neurology knows that we know jack all about the brain right now.
Mm,
He said, let me just give you a perception. I have a lot of friends who perform neurosurgery. Why do they keep the patient awake? Because they're afraid of cutting something they shouldn't, because we don't know what each cell of the brain functions as. So
wow.
the research that they're doing is based on very limited information on the brain. Like we have the information that, okay, over here is sort of language, but it also performs some other functions we're not quite sure of. So the basis of the research on general AI isn't there for me. I'm just like, yeah, this is
Is
pretty
it
much hype.
that much of a paradigm shift from
Oh, it is.
okay.
It is.
And
And
somehow they give us a timeline of 5 years, right?
right. Well,
Yep.
that's that. Okay. What the other factor in the United States that is involved is almost all this research, and you can see it now, right? There's articles, is done because they put so much venture capital into this.
Mm,
They have to raise the capital. Anyone who knows in sales or any kind of sales,
yep.
right? Which pretty much venture capital is, right? You go in and you give your pitch.
Yep.
What is your pitch? Well, you say in 5 years I can do this amazing thing, or in 10 years I can do this amazing thing, and they've been doing that since 1940. Okay, I went to Dartmouth. They created the first AI in 1945 on Dartmouth's campus, and they've been doing that since then. I'm keep waiting for this singularity that they say every 5 years. Okay, so I'm a little bit more skeptical than the most. Like, yeah, okay, talk to me in 5 years when you want more money, more billions to continue this research because you didn't come up with the singularity you thought you came up with. So I'm a lot less worried about this Terminator thing happening. Like, oh yeah, because honestly, yeah, we are
It's
light years away in my perspective. Now, do I know what's happening at DARPA, like behind closed doors?
yeah,
No,
that's true.
but they're thinking gajillions into this. Half of your tax dollars, I'm sure that they're not telling you. But what's DARPA? That's the secret robotics part of the Army of the United States. Yeah,
Advanced
defense.
research projects, something.
Yeah,
They came
it's
up with all the innovations in the iPhone.
exactly right. It eventually trickles into the public, but
Yep.
like all governments, ours uses it to, maintain superiority, and they want to use it for nefarious war purposes.
Mm,
So yeah, they're looking to get Gen AI first. So is China. So is Russia. Like we're not alone. But in the meantime, from what I know, I can die and go to sleep without a problem. It isn't happening right now. The
right.
singularity they keep talking about, I could be proven wrong, but I'll be around in 5 years going, told you.
All right. Just another uh, mention, obviously, that we're past the hour
Yeah.
mark. So you're going to get your CEUs. Just give us 24 hours to get the recording up on the website and to send an email with the certificate. Um, if there's any other pressing questions, please do put it in the chat or in the Q&A. Um, anything else, Holly, you would like to add? Thank you so much for joining us. This is always great. I always love any conversation with you. I find hugely and frighteningly informative. So that's wonderful.
Well, thank you. As all interpreters, I love to talk, so I can bore you for hours. Just tell me when to shut off. It's fine.
Wonderful, wonderful. Okay. All right. So thank you all so much. We will be here in a few weeks with our next webinar. If you have any questions, please do reach out. We'll get in touch with Holly.
Yeah, I'm
We'll
happy to answer.
wonderful, wonderful. Well, thanks again so much, Holly.
No worries.
And look forward to hopefully hosting you again in the future.
Bye, everybody. And if you want a presentation for your organization, we do that at Safe AI too. Go to our website and ask. We're fine.
Absolutely. Safe AI, everyone. Okay. Thank you, Holly.
Bye bye, everybody.